Hi there, students, and welcome to lecture number 1 for Intro to Nutrition. I am Sarah Shoemaker, and this is the format in which all online lectures for this semester will be in. Hopefully you were in class on day 1 and got this lecture in person, but maybe you want a refresher, or maybe you missed class, or you were late to join, or you're just curious what this online format is all about. So here it is. This is actually my first video recording in this format for the semester, so it might be a little awkward. Give me a chance to warm up. Anyway, this intro slide here is just left over from the first day of class, just a reminder about the 2 books that are required for the class and pictures of what they look like. So, Chapter 1 of this nutrition. This is a new nutrition textbook for me, by the way. I just switched to it because I really like the online software that comes with it, especially since I'm going to be out for half the semester and really wanted to have a textbook that was compatible with an online sort of course. So I've switched, and there are parts about this textbook I like and parts I don't like. I think I'm still biased because I like my old textbook, but this is a good textbook. It has a lot of good information. It's just organized slightly differently than my old textbook, and the beginning couple of chapters are the ones that kind of throw me. So again, give me a little wiggle room, I guess, with this first lecture. So anyway, the first chapter of this textbook is pretty short and pretty introductory. The point is to introduce you to the concept of nutrition, what it is, what nutrients are, and why studying nutrition is important, and learning about nutrition is relevant to each and every person in the world, not just in this class. So, what are nutrients? Nutrients are chemicals or substances that are in food that we have to eat and we need those chemicals in order for our body to function properly, okay? So there are a lot of nutrients out there that have been discovered in, actually really, nutrition's a pretty young field, maybe 130 years old or so. So there's a lot of nutrients out there that are known, and we're going to talk about pretty much all of them this semester. Many nutrients in our diet are what we call essential nutrients. They are things that we have to get from food because our body can't produce them. Not all nutrients in our diet have to come from food. So an example would be cholesterol. Cholesterol is a molecule, a substance that's found in food, but also our bodies can synthesize it. We don't have to get it from food. If we don't eat any food with cholesterol in it, our bodies will survive just fine. Cholesterol is actually a very important molecule. There's a lot of it's got a bad rep, but it's actually very important for cell functions. So it is not an essential nutrient. We don't need to get it from food because our bodies can produce it. But most of the nutrients we'll talk about in this class are essential. We do have to get them from food. If we don't get essential nutrients from food, if we don't eat the right foods or enough food, we can suffer from deficiency diseases. These can be specific to, well, they are always specific to certain nutrients. And we'll talk about a couple deficiency diseases later in this lecture, but also later in the semester when we go through each of the nutrients. We'll talk about each of their specific deficiency diseases. So that's why it's important. It's important to eat properly, not only to prevent deficiency diseases, but you'll also see several chronic diseases that are influenced by nutrition as well. So the field of nutrition is really the study of all of these nutrients and how they help our body to function properly. And I also just, I guess, want to reference this picture here from your textbook, a figure. I like it. It goes to show you where some of these nutrients go in your body. So your body is actually primarily composed of water, both males and females. About 50 to 70% of your body mass is actually water and water weight. A significant proportion of your body, of your biomass, contains fat and protein. And then the rest is mostly minerals, namely calcium and phosphorus in your bones. And a tiny, tiny bit is carbohydrate. All right. There's also some vitamins mixed in there, I guess very small amounts. But it kind of goes to show that a lot of nutrients that you eat not only help to fuel your body and give you energy, they actually make up the structure of your body. They form parts of the cells and your bones, etc. So, food is important. This textbook doesn't really touch on this topic. My old textbook did, which is where I got this picture, and I just like to mention it on the first day in particular. Nutrition, as we're talking about, is very important for your health. Nutrition and physical activity, actually. We discussed both in this class. But they're really only a portion of what determines your health. There are multiple other factors. The ones listed here: occupational health, social health, emotional health, spiritual health. The fact that the rest of the things, things happening in your life are, balanced and healthy, and your stress is low, and genetics is not even mentioned on here, but genetics contribute to your wellness as well. So nutrition and physical activity contribute one piece of the pie towards your health. It's not the whole story, though. It's a big piece. It's a big chunk of the pie. But just always kind of keep in the back of your mind that it's not everything, but it definitely has a strong influence. So we talked about, I mentioned a minute ago that if you don't get properly nourished, if you don't get all your essential nutrients, you can suffer from nutrient deficiency diseases, such as the ones that are listed here in this bottom box. All right, scurvy is a good example of one. Scurvy is a vitamin C deficiency. Okay. It's characterized by a loss. Vitamin C is important for building collagen, which is an important structural protein in the skin and in the subcutaneous tissues all over your body and in all the tissues of your body, really. So you start getting deterioration of a lot of tissues, you start getting hemorrhaging, a little bleeding, bruising, your gums start to fall apart and you lose teeth and bleeding gums. And it's fatal. It can be fatal if not treated, and a lot of sailors died from scurvy back in the 1700s. I think more than half, if it was like a 6-month voyage, more than half of the sailors would die from vitamin C deficiency because they didn't know about vitamin C. They didn't know what caused it. So anyway, these are diseases that are directly caused by nutrient deficiencies. If you're not eating properly, you're not getting enough vitamin or nutrient, you will get this disease. And once you have that disease, if you then get that vitamin or nutrient, then the disease will be cured. Okay, that's a direct cause and effect relationship. But there's a list of other diseases that nutrition maybe does not play a direct role in, but certainly indirectly has a role or a strong influence in. The second tier here goes through lists some diseases where nutrition is thought to play a pretty strong, important role. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure, obesity, all of these, diet and exercise are used to help treat these diseases, are extremely successful in treating a lot of these diseases, but not 100% of them, not all the time. In scurvy, 100% of the time you give someone vitamin C and they will recover. Obesity, you treat someone with diet and exercise, won't necessarily fix the problem. So there's other genetic causes, hormonal issues. There are some other underlying causes that can contribute, but diet and exercise do play a strong component in these diseases. Finally, this third tier are diseases in which it's thought nutrition plays a role, but it's a little bit less clear. And diet and exercise maybe help, maybe don't. It's a little bit less clear. Osteoarthritis and osteoporosis, so weakening of the bones as you age. Vitamin D and calcium are very important for bone development, bone growth, and so it's thought maybe not getting enough of those nutrients early in life when bone is developing or later in life when bone is starting to deteriorate, and that taking supplements could help with that. Also, exercise helps to strengthen bones. Certain forms of cancer have been, certain foods or food groups have been pegged as increasing one's risk for certain forms of cancer. So understanding what there is to know about the different nutrients in your diet can help you to prevent some of these or lower your risk for developing some of these diseases. So, and these are, especially the second tier here, these are some diseases that are extremely prevalent in the U.S. So, oops. This slide just goes over that from that second tier, a lot of the diseases, actually all of those tiers, the heart disease, cancer, these are all the major killers in the United States as of 2009. That's the most recent data, okay? And there's a lot of things that cause people to be predisposed to these diseases. There's a lot of risk factors, including genetics, age, environmental conditions, but also diet and lifestyle. So diet and life, I guess this slide is just to illustrate that it's not just diet and lifestyle that can lead to these diseases. There are other contributing factors and risk factors, but diet and lifestyle is one of them. So, and it's one that we can change, that we can affect a change in. You can't change your genetics, can't change your age, okay? You can change your diet and lifestyle. So knowing how to do that is can be pretty powerful. One of the reasons that all of these that deaths from these different chronic diseases and rates of these chronic diseases have increased in the U.S. is because of increasing obesity and overweight in the U.S. And part of that is thought to be because our eating habits and our lifestyle habits have changed over the years. So this table from your book just illustrates some of the changes in our beverage consumption in the last 40 years. That milk consumption has gone down, which has a lot of calcium and vitamin D, and also has a lot of fat, but our consumption of carbonated soft drinks has gone up a lot. And we'll talk about this later at a discussion for another day about carbonated soft drinks and their role in obesity. But essentially, the American diet now has more fat, more calories, and more sugar than it ever has in the past. And also our physical activity levels have decreased. So it makes sense mathematically that we would be larger than we were several years ago. So that's topic for more in-depth discussion for a later lecture. Again, this chapter is just introduction to what we'll be talking about this semester. So we're talking about, we keep saying, nutrients are important for your health. Well, there are 6 types of nutrients that we will be talking about. Nutrients are classified into really 6 different groups. That would be carbohydrates, fats, proteins, minerals, stopped counting here, carbs, fats, proteins, minerals, vitamins, and water. Okay, water is kind of in its own classification. But these other nutrients get sort of broken down further into these 2 groups, the macronutrients and the micronutrients. Okay, this is my visual slide. It's supposed to be sort of a mnemonic slide here for you. The macronutrients are large in big fonts because macro means big. Macronutrients are nutrients we need in large quantities. We need to have grams of carbohydrates and grams of protein and grams of fat every day. Also, these macronutrients are the ones that give us energy. This star power thing back here is supposed to be energy, okay? They provide calories. Calories, energy, same thing. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Only these 3 nutrients, only the macronutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins, provide calories. Vitamins and minerals do not. Vitamins and minerals we need in much smaller amounts. That's why we call them micronutrients. We need like milligrams or micrograms per day. So very small amounts of vitamins and minerals are sufficient, which doesn't mean that they're not important, because there's a lot of deficiency diseases related to not having enough minerals or vitamins. So you do still need to make sure you're getting enough of them, but the amount we need of each is very small compared to the amount of carbs, proteins, and fats that we need in our diet. And then water, sort of in its own grouping. It doesn't provide calories. Most people know that. But it is, as you remember from the first slide, a major component of our bodies. More than half of our bodies are composed of water. So water is a very important nutrient. As you know, you can die of thirst. So this is a nice table that I like from the first chapter that goes through and kind of summarizes the major functions of each of the 6 different nutrient groups. I'm not going to go over it now. We will talk about all of these functions of all of the nutrients in the chapters when we discuss them more in depth. But what I mostly want you to know is that, well, we'll stay on this slide, that carbs, lipids, and proteins give you energy, and vitamins and minerals don't, and neither does water. But that vitamins and minerals do have other functions, and you can read about them here, and we'll talk about them, obviously, in future chapters. The last nutrient, I guess, that we can talk about are phytochemicals. So phytochemicals aren't really in their own class of nutrient yet. They're still kind of new and on the rise in terms of research. They're oftentimes thrown in with the vitamins because they are vitamin-like substances. Phytochemicals are not considered nutrients because there's no known phytochemical deficiency disease. So, but it is thought that including phytochemicals in your diet improves or reduces your risk to developing a lot of those chronic diseases we talked about: diabetes, heart disease, stroke, aging even. So phytochemical, the word phytochemical just means plant chemical. These are just chemicals that are naturally occurring in different plant foods and often sort of correspond with plant pigments or plant colors. So, for instance, lycopene is actually a red pigment and is found in red fruits and vegetables like tomatoes and watermelons, et cetera, all these different phytochemicals listed here, the color, fruit or vegetable they're found in, and some example foods that they're found in. Most of them have antioxidant properties. And again, we'll talk more about antioxidants in the chapter on vitamins. But and it's also been shown that diets that are high in fruits and vegetables do correlate with a lower risk of cancer and certain diseases. So it's unclear whether the phytochemicals themselves are responsible for that reduced risk or whether it's something else that we don't know about in the fruits and vegetables. But phytochemicals are definitely thought to be, at this point, very beneficial for our health. So when we were talking about the macronutrients, I said those are the carbs, proteins, and fats are the only ones that provide energy. And when I said energy, I meant calories, okay? Energy from nutrients are calories. Calorie chemistry, the definition of a calorie in chemistry is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Okay, so 1 kilocalorie is the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. When we talk about nutrition calories, we're really talking about kilocalories. In fact, nutrition calories usually have a capital C. So it's maybe a little bit confusing, but really what I want you to know is that in this class, calories are the same thing as kilocalories, which is the same thing as kcal, and you will see them designated in different forms throughout lectures in the textbook. So if we're talking about calories, kilocalories, or kcals, it's all the same thing, and it's always that we're talking about the energy that we get from food. This little cartoon here was somebody sent me, an email, spam sort of a thing. It said, calories are the little bastards that get into your wardrobe at night and sew your clothes tighter. I thought it was cute. But obviously that's not really what calories are, right? So the different macronutrients each provide a different number of calories per gram. Carbs and proteins both actually provide 4 calories per gram, whereas fats provide 9 calories per gram. So this little figure I've drawn here is to illustrate that fats, because they pack more calories per gram, they pack more energy per gram. It means they are very energy dense. And a lot of times we'll talk about nutrients that are energy dense or foods that are energy dense. And that's what we're saying. We're saying that fats, because they provide 9 calories per gram instead of 4 calories per gram, they're very energy dense. Okay? So another thing that's going to come up later in the course when we're talking about energy in terms of exercise and using ATP in our bodies and burning energy in our bodies and metabolism, we're talking about metabolism. We're not talking about calories anymore. Now we're going to be talking about ATP. So just a little clarification on that. When we eat food, we get energy in the form of calories. Then we convert those calories in our body into a type of energy called ATP. It's simply a form of energy conversion. And the analogy I like to make is it's just like currency conversion. It's like if you want to go to Montreal and go shopping, you have to go to a bank and exchange your American dollars for Canadian dollars because you can't shop in Canada with American dollars, and maybe you can in Montreal, so I don't know, it might be a bad example, but if you're going to Europe, okay, you can't in another country use the currency from America. It's still money, you're still exchanging one type of money for another. It's just a different currency. So it's the same thing. It's still energy, kilocalories, ATP. It's all a form of energy. It's just, moving from one country to another, from food to cells. Okay? So just, I guess try to keep that in mind when we're talking about kilocalories, ATP. We're always referring to energy. Just kilocalories are in food, and ATP is in cells. So at the end, that's sort of the intro to all the nutrients and some of the vocabulary and terms you need to know about nutrition. And at the end of this chapter, I do kind of like that it has these little key nutrition concepts, these sort of big overviews, the kind of thing that, if you decide to drop the class after the first day, at least you will maybe be able to take these key concepts with you and maybe use them to fruition. This first concept, to me, I think is the most important concept that you'll learn this semester. I think that if you can remember these 4 tenets of a healthy diet, then you are set for a healthy life. If you can always follow these 4 simple tenets, if your diet always meets these requirements, okay? And that is that your diet is adequate, moderate, balanced, and varied. And what does that mean? Adequate means that you're getting enough of the things you need. You're getting enough vitamins and minerals and calories to meet your body's needs so it can function optimally. Moderate is sort of the flip side of that. It's easy to get enough if you eat a whole bunch, but then you're getting too much. So moderate means that you're getting enough but not too much. And then balanced and varied are kind of similar. Balanced means that you're eating lots of different types of foods from different food groups. So you don't just eat grains all the time, that you eat grains and fruits and vegetables and proteins. You have a little bit of everything mixed in. A varied diet means that within a food group, you're not just eating one type of food. So, for example, maybe for lunch today you had a turkey sandwich on whole wheat bread with some carrot sticks and an apple, okay? So you've got your grains in the bread, you've got protein in the meat, you've got vegetables with the carrots, and you've got a fruit with your apple, okay? That's great. That's a very balanced diet. But if you have that for lunch and for dinner every day for, months, then you're not having a varied diet. You're not getting different nutrients that you would get from different fruits and vegetables, different types of grains, etc. So you want to make sure that your diet meets all of these: adequate, moderate, balanced, and varied. And if it does, then you're doing a good job. All right, this second concept, that there are no good or bad foods, okay? And I sort of agree with this, but sometimes I'm not sure I do. So what the book prefers to classify foods, instead of good or bad, it prefers to classify them as empty calorie foods versus nutrient dense foods versus energy dense foods, all right? So empty calorie foods are the ones we usually consider bad foods. And my example here is one of my personal favorites, those McCafe, like blended coffee drinks at McDonald's, okay? A lot of sugar, a lot of fat, and pretty much not really any nutrients, not a whole lot of vitamins or minerals, okay? It packs in a lot of calories, but very few vitamins and minerals, very few micronutrients. So the reason we can't really call this a good food or a bad food is, take this scenario, okay? Someone who is obese, who goes to McDonald's and orders a large mocha McCafe, okay, with whipped cream and the drizzle and whatnot, that's probably going to contribute extra calories to their diet that they don't need, and not any micronutrients that they do need. For them, that would be a bad food choice because it's contributing extra calories and no micronutrients. Now, take the second scenario: an Ironman triathlete who just did a 20-mile run that morning, goes to McDonald's and orders a large mocha McCafe, all right? The caffeine in it helps muscle repair. The fat and protein will help, and carbohydrates, actually all of the macronutrients in there, will help give him energy to get through the day and replace the energy stores that he lost during his 20-mile run. For someone who's really fit and who needs a lot of calories because they burn a lot of calories, this is actually kind of a good food for them. So when it comes to empty calorie foods, people who need a lot of calories can spare some empty calorie foods in their diet. So for them, it's not really a bad food. So I think that's why they say there's no good or bad foods. It's all very individual. Nutrition is very individual, and that's what I really like to get across in this class and with the diet analysis project that you do, that you have to find the diet that's right for you and for your nutritional needs and for your lifestyle needs. And we'll get to that on like 2 slides. So the key with empty calorie foods is to moderate them. Don't overdo it. Moderation is key, and you don't have to avoid them entirely. Just make sure that you're getting a moderate amount. Nutrient-dense foods are foods the opposite. They're foods that pack in a lot of micronutrients for not a lot of calories. And nutrient-dense foods essentially are going to be mostly fresh fruits and vegetables, but pretty much any food that is not processed, any food that is fresh. So even grains, like whole grain foods. I would even say maybe some cuts of meat that are not preserved, like fresh cuts of meat. But meat does have a lot of calories. It also has a lot of micronutrients as well. But fresh fruits and vegetables particularly are very nutrient dense. A lot of vitamins and minerals, not a lot of calories. Energy dense foods have a lot of calories per weight. So they are foods that are very fattening, because fat is the most energy dense nutrient. So foods that are high in fat are going to be energy dense foods. 2 examples I have here are a big fat cheeseburger, loaded cheeseburger, and a handful of nuts, of almonds in this case. Both are high fat foods. Some people might say that the burger is a bad food and the nuts are a good food, okay? But the point is, they're both energy dense. They both have a lot of fat and a lot of calories. The nuts, I would say, are also fairly nutrient dense. They have a lot of micronutrients in them maybe not as many as the burger does. Or sorry, maybe more than the burger does. But again, depending on your needs, your calorie needs, your micronutrient needs, one of these choices might be better for you than the other. And so, sort of knowing what your needs are helps you to sort of moderate each of these different categories of foods. When it comes to nutrition, sometimes there's this idea that, oh, this vitamin's really good for you, or oh, antioxidants are so good, they help prevent cancer. So here, take a whole bunch of antioxidants, because some antioxidants are good, so more antioxidants must be better, okay? And you really have to be careful in nutrition because a lot of nutrients, a lot of vitamins and minerals in particular, can be toxic at high doses. So you don't want to get too little because too little of something can result in a deficiency, and deficiencies can be fatal, which is bad. But getting too much of a good thing is often not a good thing either. You can have toxicity effects, which can also be fatal depending on the vitamin or mineral. So making sure that your intake is within a safe range, and it's often a fairly generous range that you can be within, is important. And when we talk about vitamins and vitamin supplementation, we'll talk about sort of the dangers of toxicity. But a toxic, or actually I shouldn't say toxic, there's a term, megadosing. A megadose of any vitamin or mineral is taking 10 times the recommended amount of that vitamin or mineral. And you want to try to avoid doing that. And it's really almost impossible to do that from diet alone, from eating food, to megadose on anything. But it is much more common if you are taking supplements, particularly supplements that are just single, like a single vitamin supplement, like just a vitamin A supplement, or a lot of like bodybuilding even multivitamins for like bodybuilders and stuff have very high doses of vitamins. So if you take supplements, you might want to check the label and be careful about that. So speaking of supplements can be very beneficial. They can prevent you from having a deficiency. They can keep you, if you're in this range, vitamin supplement can help you get into this safe, healthy range. But nutritionists basically all agree that the best way to nourish your body is to get your nutrients from food. There's a lot of reasons for this. One is that vitamins and minerals from nutrient supplements, from pills, are not actually absorbed as well. A lot of chemicals in food interact together in order to improve absorption and breakdown of food. So it's not, I don't even think it's really known for a lot of nutrients what the difference is in terms of the absorptive rates. For a few, it's definitely known that they are not absorbed as well from a pill as they are from food. So food is actually a superior place to get your nutrients from. Also, we mentioned phytochemicals being good for your health. So if you are not eating plants and vegetables, if you're not eating fruits and vegetables, if you're not eating a lot of plant foods, if you eat sort of a lot of processed foods and you take a multivitamin, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same quality of nutrition as if you were eating a variety of whole foods and processed foods. So, and like I mentioned, supplements also increase your risk for megadosing. So not to bash supplements, but just to say don't depend on them. They can be a good sort of insurance policy to make sure that you're getting what you need, but you don't want to just count on your vitamin supplements to keep you healthy. So this slide here, this fifth nutrition concept, I think I touched on it a minute ago, that there's no one-size-fits-all diet, that nutrition is very individualized. Like I gave that example of the obese person ordering a milkshake and a triathlete ordering the milkshake, that their nutrient needs are going to be very, very different, and so their diets will need to be very different. And that's one of the things I kind of love about this course, and I love about nutrition, is that there's no one right answer. And if you had it in your head that, oh, you're going to take this class because I'm going to tell you the miracle diet or the right way to eat. There's no such thing. It's going to be different for everyone based on your nutrient needs, based on your lifestyle, your genetics, your preferences, your budget. There's so many different factors that factor into how we eat and what we need to eat and what we like to eat, that there's really no one diet that fits everyone. So I really encourage you to explore your needs this semester when developing your plan through our diet analysis project. I like this concept here. I think some people have it in their minds that certain foods belong to certain food groups and thus certain nutrient groups. But foods are all mixtures of different nutrients. So an example here is this slice of whole wheat bread, all right? Most people think, oh, bread is a carb. Bread has carbohydrates in it, all right? And it does. Bread does have a lot of carbohydrates. It has about, 12 or 13 grams of carbohydrate in one slice, okay? But that's not the only nutrient found in bread. Bread also contains protein. I'm looking at the pink line here on the bar graphs. Bread also contains some protein, some fat, a little bit of calcium, okay? Quite a bit of water, actually a surprising amount of water in one slice of bread. So foods, just to try to keep that in mind, that foods are a mixture of different nutrients, not just one or a couple of type of nutrients. I like this one. I like introducing this one early on. Certain foods and nutrients are not cure-alls. There's no such thing as a superfood. Like I was saying before, people, the scientists realize that, nutrition scientists realize that antioxidants help protect us from cancer. So then someone goes out and finds a food that's naturally high in antioxidants and claims that if you eat tons of this food or you boil that food down and you turn it into a supplement, that it can protect you from cancer or it can cure cancer. There's no one food that is a cure-all. It's eating a well-rounded, adequate, moderate, balanced, and varied diet and getting your nutritional needs met. That is really the key to health, not overdoing it on some superfood. And I like this ad. I picked this ad because they're trying to really convince you that you can cheat death. That if you drink lots of pomegranate juice, which is high in antioxidants, that you can cheat death. But it's just not true. The last thing really to keep in mind is this concept that nutrition is a dynamic science. Dynamic means that it's changing. It's a relatively young science, and the findings in nutrition are constantly being reassessed and reevaluated, and the paradigms are always changing. So it's kind of good to have a flexible mind. I'm sure that the content of this textbook is very different than the content of a nutrition textbook from 20 years ago because things have shifted and new research has suggested new things about nutrition and how it relates to health. So it's kind of neat in that way that there's still a lot we have left to learn, but there's also a lot that we know, and that's the stuff we're going to talk about. And we'll also discuss a little bit some of the things that are controversial in nutrition science right now. But I'm hoping that at the end of this class you will have gained enough in basic information about nutrition to be an informed consumer of nutritional news and nutritional research, and to make up your own mind about what you think when you hear some new health claim pertaining to nutrition. And then the last sort of concepts that are covered in this chapter, it sort of throws in a little bit about malnutrition globally and at home in the U.S. And it points out that malnutrition, literally malnutrition, the word malnutrition means bad nutrition. So most people, when you hear the word malnourished, you think someone who's undernourished. And globally, undernourishment is a huge problem. What is it? 3.5 million deaths per year globally in developing nations due to undernutrition, to starvation. It is a big problem globally. And that's for a lot of reasons, not just that they can't grow their own food, they are poor economically, so can't get food imported, or the roads are really poor. They live in really remote areas that it's hard to get food to. A lot of political issues, political unrest, and civil war can lead to food shortages. Lack of sanitary water sources is another big thing. A lot of infectious diseases, both parasitic, bacterial, etc. Lots of different causes of undernutrition globally, and lots of deaths per year. Though undernutrition is not, and here's a map. It's actually maybe a little outdated at this point, but just sort of showing you regions globally where undernutrition is a huge problem. In southern parts of Africa, in South America, Southeast Asia. So still is a big problem, but as you notice here in the US and Canada, undernutrition not a big problem here. We do have some undernutrition in the United States. Most of it, though, is people who have some other underlying condition like an eating disorder or alcohol or drug abuse can lead to undernutrition or starvation. But we don't otherwise really have true undernutrition. There's families who are in poverty and who don't necessarily have enough money to buy enough food for all the time, every day. They suffer from food insecurity. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. But usually they do get enough nourishment to survive, not as significant as in these developing countries. In the U.S., of course, the bigger problem, and in a lot of developing countries and developed countries, it's not just the U.S. and Canada, but in Europe as well, and Russia, Australia, okay, overnutrition, the other type of malnutrition, is the big problem. Getting too much food, too many calories in our diet. And this little cartoon here, I don't know if anyone ever read Shel Silverstein as a child. I loved Shel Silverstein. He was a children's author, and he wrote some stories, and he wrote a couple of poem books. And one of them, Where the Sidewalk Ends, there's this poem called Hungry Mungry, and we have the book at home. My stepsons love this one poem. It's about this little boy named Hungry Mungry, and he eats all his dinner. He eats everything on his plate, and then he eats his bowl and his spoon, and then he eats the table, and then he eats his parents and his dog and his house, and it goes on, and until he eats the whole world and the whole universe, and then there was nothing left to eat except for himself, and he ate himself. It's, kind of weird and twisted, but it kind of, I feel like is the ultimate poster boy for overnutrition, right? Okay, so in America, we do have a problem right now, a health problem with obesity and overweight. So more than a third of Americans right now are considered obese, and which is essentially they are over a certain weight line that increases their risk for chronic disease. And that's a serious problem and a serious drain really on healthcare in this country. So overnutrition is the one we'll probably focus on more in this class, and undernutrition is really just touched on briefly in this chapter. And that is the end of chapter 1, so I'm going to stop here, because that's where we're going to stop on the first day of class. And I hope that this was not too painful to watch as it was to record. Goodbye.